Okay, Boker Tov, welcome to our Erev Shabbat Friday Parashat edition class, Parashat Vayesse. And the question is, when did this happen? When was Am Yisrael all of a sudden formed? And when was the decision made for Yaakov Abinu to be the father and structure of that nation? In this parasha, Yaakov Avinu enters the parasha as a single man, and he ends the parasha as a man with 4 wives, 10 sons, and 1 daughter. And by next week's parasha, all 12 what we call future tribes are already born. And decisions have been made, apparently, because we know when he's renamed in next week's parasha to Yisrael, he's already given the name that we will take on historically as a nation, as the Am Yisrael people. The people we call Bnei Yisrael. We're not called the sons of Abraham. We're not called the sons. Why not? Bnei Abraham, is he not the man? Bnei Yitzhak. Why are we named Bnei Yisrael? Why is the structure of Am Yisrael? And this has ramifications with the 12 tribes for geography. It has ramifications for inheritance. It has ramification for identification. The structure of the Jewish people and the designed, intended manner by God in the land of Israel is that of the tribes which are emanating from the sons of Yaakov Abinu. So, who called the shot? Is this the way it was meant to be? Is this something that was planned? Is this something that Abraham Abinu knew about? Is it something that Yaakov knew about? Did he take this glory on himself? And if so, yes or no to any of these answers, why is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose it this way? And Yaakov has this distinct honor, and his sons, it could have been 1 or 2 of Abraham's sons, or Yitzhak's, and we know why Isaac didn't make the cut, but it could have just been one nation, a nice, homogeneous nation where we divide things based on city and not necessarily based on exact lineage of a specific son, with all the sons of the forefathers. It was done seemingly in a very scientific manner, and you have to say, with intent by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we don't understand why. And therefore, the first thing before we try to answer this really fundamental question, I think we need to just come to terms with the fact that this arrangement was known by our forefathers, and I think by Yaakov Avinu included, in advance. And then we'll try to answer why. So how do we know that? Let's start with Yaakov. How do we know that he had an inclination that there was a certain number, and that number was intended, and that number was critical? And in fact, his wives were in on it, seemingly, at least Rachel and Leah. We know that in the order of births in this parasha, Leah was up first, and she had 4 children. Of course, Hazit Rachel was akara, she didn't know what to do. She mimicked Sarah Imenu, and she gave a Shivha, Bilha, to Yaakov. We don't consider them necessarily Pilagshim, concubines, although it's referred at one point as that. But here it's referred to Isha. And that's by and large the more acceptable approach, but that's a separate discussion. In any case, he was given Bilha to have children. She has 2 more children. And then at one certain point, it says that Leah saw ki ameda miledet, that she stopped having children. Now, what does that mean? In our day and age, you can at least relate to current sentiments, and a woman starts to panic. When does she start to panic? So 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, right? And then you start thinking about modern, applications, fertility, etc. How long was this hiatus of Leah's? She started having children. It wasn't even 2 years. And she seemed to panic. And so she decides, in a very desperate move, to give Zilpah, her maidservant, to Yaakov for a wife. Now, when Sarah did it, Sarah felt that she would never have children and let Abraham have some offspring. So she gives him Hagar. That's the most desperate move, in the most desperate measure, in the most desperate time. That has 4 children already. She may or may not have more. It hasn't been a long time. And Yaakov has 2 others from Bilhah. Why in the world would she feel and see fit to give Zilpah to Yaakov Abinu? Is that appropriate? Is that necessary? Ramban asked this question because he's perplexed by it, as we are. And he answers the fact, and here he calls, although besides Sarai and Menu, none of our matriarchs are listed as the 7 prophetesses, female prophets of Am Yisrael, the Ramban here at least is using this term, you can say temporarily or on the spot or in a certain manner, says that both Rachel and Leah, through their prophetic ability, had an understanding and an acceptance and a tradition that there was going to be a certain amount of tribes of Israel. And there, Yaakov Abinu's children and therefore future descendants would be divided into 12. And Leah, in her zealousness, in her motivation, in her, you can say, in her desire to be altruistic and to be virtuous and to be really an important part of Am Yisrael, she wanted more, simply put, and maybe the majority. She ended up with 6 out of 12, right? On her own, but she didn't know that she was going to have more. Just because of that slight doubt, that was enough to put her into panic. Gives Zilpah, it will be counted to some extent from me, and therefore I can get maybe to a majority. She was interested in that not because of some pettiness or some type of arrogance, only because she wanted to merit that great honor. So there's an indication that if Leah knew, we're assuming that Yaakov Abinu obviously was in on this. But let's go further back to Yitzhak Abinu. It's evident that he was already onto this, because at the end of Parashat Toledot, when Yitzhak, by instructions of Rivka, decided to send Yaakov, of course, we knew his life was in danger from Esav. Yitzhak didn't know this. Rivka used another reason, which was a true reason. He didn't want Yaakov to marry Benot Het, daughters of Het, like Esav had. And she told Yitzhak, I won't have it. And Yitzhak said, you're absolutely right. And he sent Yaakov with instructions to Haran, to her family, to find a wife. Part of the beracha that he gave him, it's in Perek Kafhet, chapter 28, Pasuk Gimal 3. Ve'el Shaddai yebarech otecha, v'yaftecha v'yadecha, God will bless you, he'll make you multiply and great. V'hayita lekala amim. And you will be a congregation of amim, of nations. What does that mean exactly? The Emek Davar says, well, kahal always indicates a certain number, 10 at least, but maybe a lot more, a certain number. And amim, he says, are really distinct, you can say, sub-sects, sub-factions, right, of something larger, each with their own unique characteristics. Of course, then the Emek Davar is saying, and others understand this as well, indicating the future subdivisions of Am Yisrael, the Kal Amim, a congregation of distinct subsets, sectors, factions. That is the tribes, seemingly part of the blessing of Yitzhak to Yaakov Abinu when he sent him away. Now, how do we know that he was spot on, that he was really onto something, Yitzhak Abinu? Because in next week's parasha, in Vayishlach, next week's parasha, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to Yaakov Abinu after his struggles with Laban in a prophecy after he came to Eretz Yisrael, and he was renamed from Yaakov to Yisrael. This is in Perek Lamed chapter 35, Pasuk Yod Aleph, Vayomer lo Elohim, Aniyah Shaddai. This is right after he called him Israel. Pereh Urbe, similar to his father, multiply and be great. Goy ukhal goyim yihyeh b'Mekka. A nation and a nation of nations, kahal goyim, will emanate from you, will descend from you, and kings as well. And there the Mefarshim tell us, indeed, what is Hashem talking about? Kahal goyim, to say a goy, to say a nation. Rather, this is the same as kahal amim, a subdivided nation of different distinct components. It's Hashem talking. And indeed, in Parashat Vayesse, fast forward, Yaakov Avinu was on his deathbed, he conveys to Yosef, I had a prophecy way back when, that El Shaddai, that Hashem, the same El Shaddai, spoken about in Parashat Vayishlach, appeared to me in Luz, in Israel. There it is, in Parashat Vayishlach, he blessed me, he's telling this, he's revealing this now to Yosef. And this is in Perek Memchet, chapter 48, in Pasuk Dalet, and number 4, and he told him as follows. God told him, I'm going to create you into, again, a nation of different peoples. So this is clear. It was Hashem's plan. Yitzhak Abinu was onto it. Let's make a safe assumption that Abraham Abinu was onto this as well. This is known. This is well known. The question before us only then is why was Yaakov then the father of the superstructure and the outline of Am Yisrael? Why did he marry this Kahal Amim or Kahal Goyim structure and the tribes? And the name, the identity that we have, Bnei Yisrael, is through Yaakov. There are a number of possible theories. Let's engage in a few. We actually can relate to our Seder table on Pesach night. We actually quote from the book of Yehoshua, but everyone knows this. We speak about Terah, Abi, Abraham, Va'abi, Nahor, right? We go on in the same paragraph. This was a quote from the book of Yehoshua, a speech at the end of Yehoshua Benun's life to Am Yisrael. And he told them, as a historical recollection, Hashem said, Vayika'at Abraham et va'arbe et zar'o, vayiten lo et Yishak, vayiten li Yishak et Yaakov et Esav, vayiten li Esav et Har-Se'ed Reshuto, Yaakov v'Rav yardu Mitzrayim. What was the message? We read about this on Seder night. What was the message that Yehoshua Benun was giving? Everyone knows that, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, we had Esav in the mix, right? What was the actual, not unknown information that was being conveyed by Yehoshua Benun? The Meharam in Prague explains as follows, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't just say Abraham, and then the nations of Abramites, and then the subdivisions based on Abraham Abinu. And the reason is, and actually Yehoshua Benun started from Terah when he began this discussion, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needed to filter. And there was actually 3 different filtration processes until he got to something pure. He had to choose. Terah had Abraham, he had 3 sons, but Haran died, Abraham and Nahor. Who's going to be? Abraham. Abraham had Ishmael and Yitzhak. It wasn't so clear. Abraham himself wasn't sure about this. He could be the man, God. Ishmael, as we've spoken about in previous weeks. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose based on Sarah. Only Ishak. Ishak, because we know last week's Parashat and upcoming confrontations, Yaakov and Esav. And once again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made this choice, even unbeknownst at first to Yaakov, to Yitzhak Abinu, because he thought Esav was in the mix. Yaakov, Esav, Yaakov's the man. Finally, as we filter further down 3 generations, it's that 4th generation, which are then the children of Yaakov Abinu, who have emerged with purity. Now, you can ask, okay, why 3? 3, there's something to 3 being what's called creating a status, hazakah, but it's more than that. If we can now sit here in historical hindsight and look back a little bit, what was HaKadosh Baruch Hu filtering out? He was and by the way, this was something that even in this week's parasha, in the struggle with Lavan himself was challenging even the first filtration. He used the words, and he was talking about and complaining to Yaakov, you ran away, you took my children. He said, Elohei Abraham ve'Elohei Nahor yishpetu benenu. The God of Abraham and Nahor, he didn't let go yet of that first choice, right? Will judge between us. That means that the Goyim and the descendancy and continuation of history were not convinced that this filtration system was legal. And now in hindsight, we can look at the last few thousand years with the other two major world religions, Christianity and Islam. And we can know now that we, in retrospect, understand that these major religions, which make up really 1/3 almost of the Earth's population, between the two of them, it's more than 2 billion people.
Yeah.
Well, now we're at 7 million. It's close to 1/3 of the Earth's population are these religions that were filtered out. Ishmael, father of Arabs and father of Islam, and Isaac, we're making an assumption that he's Semitic, he's from Shem, and that how can we make this assumption? Edom, European countries, Christianity, of course, started with Judaism, Christianity, but then was adopted by, in the beginning at least, primarily those countries, and really white Caucasian, that would be the majority of the Christian population on earth. And so really for us, we can clearly see that the dominant religions in the world, currently speaking, are the ones that because of God's filtration process, we can look back and we can say, not you, and not you. And that's part possibly of that feeling of lacking in jealousy and trying to compensate that these religions were formed to begin with, because the filtration process is a hard pill to swallow for the population of planet Earth. And therefore, Hashem said, Yaakov's children, when we got to the state of so-called purity, post-filtration, is what we'll start with. There also is this idea at the end of this week's parasha, actually, who did Yaakov encounter upon returning to Eretz Yisrael? He encountered Malachim, right? And it says that Vayifja'u bo Malachi Elohim, Vayomer Yaakov kasher ra'am machane Elohim zeh, Vayikra Hashem ha'makamu machanayim. He counted by angels, and he said this is an encampment of angels, and he called this place Machanayim. It's a whole beautiful overview and subject in and of itself. But Rashi there says, what are these two Machanayim, two camps, two Machanot? He says, these are the angels of Prus La'aris, the diaspora outside of Israel, and the angels of Israel. This idea that you can create Kedusha in exile. Yaakov Abinu spent all this time outside of Israel. And when he came back a wealthy man, not financially only, and not in terms of family only, but in terms of what he built for himself. He came back with angels. He came back with Kedusha. And this idea that it's very possible outside of Israel to build communities, to build Torah, preferably in Israel. But we need that ability and that potential. And Yaakov, I'll just extend the idea by saying that he really represented the survival of the Jew in exile. And we need the Yaakov structure with his family out of Eretz Yisrael thriving to encourage us and to model for us what's going to be a long, difficult history, unfortunately, where already most of it is spent in exile. And therefore, that structure of the Am Yisrael's future subdivisions is starting from Yaakov Abinu, because we know that historically we'll need that structure for survival, not just in Israel, but also outside of Israel, albeit losing many of those tribes along the way, unfortunately. And finally, I'll relate to you a very nice idea that's also been based on this two mahanot, these two camps, so to speak. The Ramban says that there is a mahaneh that's a physical world campment, so to speak, And the other one is Elyonim, a metaphysical world. There's an attachment of heaven and earth, so to speak. And a tzaddik has that ability to bring heaven down to earth. And the Netibot Shalom explains in this pasuk that Yaakov Abinu was really demonstrating that you can take something earthly and create Kedusha. You can live on this earth and yet bring a piece of the metaphysical world, the holy world, the world of angels, down to this earth. And you can do that in a very mundane, everyday life way, the way he did it throughout this parasha, with business, with family, with your wives, living a godly life, and bringing Shamayim down to Addis. That's an idea that was demonstrated by Yaakov through this large superstructure of his family, through all the basic superficial discussion that went on in this parasha. We know that is survival. But in the end, Yaakov brought heaven down to earth. And so that has demonstrated the struggle with life, this struggle, financial struggle, this family struggle is only demonstrated from Yaakov Abinu. Really, Avraham Yitzhak didn't have those issues. Wealthy men their whole lives, albeit smaller families, but that was their families, right? Yaakov went through all of this. And Am Yisrael starts, therefore, with a structure of family and life from this great, the third of our forefathers, that really demonstrates to us that we, the holy nation, are in the future going to be charged with bringing holiness and disseminating it and dispersing it throughout planet Earth and being the shining light for the nations. And that yet is another possible reason why Kadosh Baruch Hu saw fit, finally, on the third great father, to be the master superstructure and future outline for Am Yisrael with his 12 tribes. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen v'Amen. Shabbat Shalom.